On Thanksgiving, my family made me eat alone on the porch. They said I didn't belong at their table. While laughter drifted through the dining room windows, someone placed my turkey dinner on a flimsy paper plate beside the front steps like I was an unwanted stray. My mother quietly closed the door. My father didn't look up. My brother lowered his eyes and said nothing. I sat in the cold, listening to silverware clink against china while my own meal soaked through the paper plate. That wasn't the moment they broke me. It was the moment they convinced themselves I would always accept it. I finished every bite, folded the empty plate, placed it neatly in the trash, and drove away without a single goodbye. For 5 years, I never called, never argued, and never asked for an apology. Then one afternoon, my brother found me by accident. The look on his face turned ghostly. Within minutes, one message froze the entire family group chat. An hour later, my phone showed 98 missed calls. None of them understood why I never answered. My name is Daniel, and for most of my life, I was the family member everyone expected to sacrifice without complaint. I was the oldest child, the dependable one who fixed broken appliances, paid overdue bills when money was tight, and quietly stepped in whenever someone else made a mistake. If my parents needed groceries, I bought them. If my brother needed help moving, I canceled my own plans. I believed that loyalty would eventually earn respect. It never did. Instead, the more I gave, the less they noticed. Every holiday, every birthday, every family gathering followed the same pattern. My opinions were interrupted, my achievements dismissed, and my kindness treated like an obligation instead of a choice. Whenever there was a difficult task, my phone rang first. When there was good news worth celebrating, I was usually the last person invited or forgotten altogether. I kept telling myself things would change. Families go through rough seasons, I thought. Maybe next year would be different. Maybe they simply didn't realize how deeply their actions affected me. Those excuses became easier to believe than accepting the truth. The Thanksgiving dinner on the porch destroyed that illusion. It wasn't just about eating outside. It was the realization that everyone inside that house had watched it happen and decided it was acceptable. Not one person opened the door. Not one person said my name. Their silence told me exactly where I stood. As I drove away that night, I made myself a promise. I wouldn't waste another year begging people to value me. I wouldn't argue, seek revenge through anger, or demand apologies that would never be sincere. I simply disappeared from their lives and built one they knew nothing about. The hardest part wasn't leaving my family. It was accepting that I had been alone long before I walked away. Looking back, I realized the dinner on the porch wasn't the beginning. It was simply the first time they stopped pretending to hide what they thought of me. Months before that Thanksgiving, the little insults had become routine. Family dinners would start before I arrived, even though everyone knew I was coming straight from work. My seat would quietly disappear, forcing me to grab a folding chair from the garage while everyone else kept eating. Nobody apologized. They simply acted as though it was normal. When conversations turned to success, my parents proudly praised my brother's new job or my cousin's latest promotion. If someone mentioned my business, the room fell strangely quiet. My father would clear his throat and change the subject. My mother would smile politely, as if my accomplishments belonged to a stranger instead of her own son. The smallest moments hurt the most. If I brought dessert, someone joked that I had probably bought it on sale because I never aimed very high when I offered to help clean the kitchen. They handed me the trash bags before anyone else lifted a finger. Their smiles were calm, their voices gentle, but the message never changed. I was useful when there was work to do and invisible when there was joy to share. Even my brother rarely spoke up. Sometimes our eyes met across the room, and I could tell he noticed what was happening. His lips would part for a second, then he would look away and say nothing. Silence became his safest choice. I stopped defending myself. Every explanation seemed to give them another reason to laugh, quietly or exchange knowing glances. Instead, I listened, observed, and remembered. By the time Thanksgiving arrived, I wasn't shocked when my meal was carried outside. I simply understood what the cold paper plate truly represented. It wasn't a place to eat. It was the place they believed I deserved. The morning after Thanksgiving, I woke up expecting to feel angry. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Clarity. For the first time, I stopped asking myself what I had done wrong. I replayed every family gathering, every ignored phone call, every quiet insult, and every forced smile. The pattern was impossible to deny. I wasn't being misunderstood. I was being tolerated only when I was useful. That realization changed everything. I drove back to my apartment, opened my contacts, and stared at my family's names. My thumb hovered over the screen for a long moment. I thought about sending a message explaining how deeply they had hurt me. I imagined asking for an apology. Then I remembered the paper plate. No explanation could make people respect someone they had already decided to look down on. One by one, I removed every expectation instead of every person. I stopped calling first. I stopped offering financial help. I stopped fixing problems nobody even thanked me for solving. I quietly changed my phone number, moved to another city for a better opportunity, and accepted a management position at a growing logistics company that valued hard work instead of taking it for granted. I didn't leave to punish them. I left because staying had become a punishment to myself. The first few months were lonely, but they were also peaceful. Without constant criticism, I discovered parts of myself I had forgotten. I worked longer hours, learned new skills, invested carefully, and built a life that belonged entirely to me. 5 years passed faster than I expected. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, I walked out of a client meeting and heard someone whisper my name. I turned around. My brother stood frozen across the parking lot, staring at me as though he'd seen a ghost. In that silent moment, I realized something had finally changed. This time, I was the one with nothing left to prove. Seeing my brother again didn't make me panic. It didn't make me angry either. I simply nodded, got into my car, and drove home. If he truly wanted to find me, he already had. There was no reason to run. That evening, I sat on my balcony and thought about the last 5 years. I hadn't spent them dreaming about revenge. I had spent them building a life that no longer depended on my family's approval. I had earned professional certifications in supply chain management, accepted promotions, and eventually became a regional operations director. Every contract I negotiated, every team I led, and every challenge I solved restored a little more confidence they had tried to take away. Still, I knew my brother's appearance would not be the end of it. By the next morning, I quietly prepared for whatever came next. I reviewed my privacy settings, updated my emergency contacts, and asked my assistant to forward any unexpected calls directly to voicemail. If my family wanted access to me again, they would have to do more than pretend the past had never happened. I also found the small cardboard box I had packed on the night I left. Inside was the folded paper napkin from that Thanksgiving dinner, a faded family photograph, and the apartment key I had never returned. I had kept them for one reason, not to hold on to pain, but to remind myself never to ignore disrespect disguised as family loyalty. When my phone finally began filling with unfamiliar numbers, I didn't block them. I simply let every call ring out. Silence had taught me more than arguments ever could. Then my brother sent a single text. "We were wrong. Please let us explain." I read the message once, locked my phone, and placed it face down on the table. For years, they had expected me to chase them for acceptance. Now they were the ones waiting. And for the first time in my life, I decided that my silence would set the terms of every conversation that followed. 3 days after my brother's message, he asked if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, but only because I wanted the conversation to end on my terms, not theirs. He arrived early. The confidence I remembered was gone. His shoulders were tense, and he looked older than his years. When I sat down, he apologized before I even picked up the menu. "I should have spoken up that night," he admitted quietly. "I watched them treat you like you didn't matter." I nodded but said nothing. He told me what had happened after he recognized me in the parking lot. He had gone home and confessed everything to the family. He described my office, the people who greeted me with respect, and the life I had built without them. For the first time, they realized I hadn't disappeared because I had failed. I had disappeared because I finally succeeded without them. My parents immediately began calling. They wanted my new address. They wanted family dinners. They wanted another chance to make things right. But what they truly wanted was relief from their own guilt. I wasn't interested in giving them that. I looked at my brother and said, "An apology doesn't erase a choice. It only admits that the choice was wrong." He lowered his head, unable to disagree. When the meeting ended, I paid for both coffees and wished him well. There was no argument, no dramatic farewell, and no list of old grievances. I simply stood, shook his hand, and walked toward the door. As I stepped outside, my phone vibrated again. Another missed call. Then another. By the time I reached my car, the screen showed 98 missed calls and a dozen unanswered messages. I silenced the phone, placed it in the glove compartment, and drove away beneath the evening sky. For years, they had left me outside the door. Now they finally understood what it felt like to be the ones left waiting. The phone calls eventually stopped. The messages became less desperate, then less frequent, until only silence remained. Ironically, it was the same silence I had lived with for years, only now, it belonged to them. A few weeks later, my brother sent one final message. Mom sets an extra plate every Thanksgiving. Nobody touches it. I stared at those words for a long time before locking my phone. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel bitter either. I simply accepted that some lessons arrive years after the damage is done. Through mutual friends, I heard pieces of what happened next. My parents' reputation within the extended family had quietly changed. Relatives who had once admired them began asking uncomfortable questions. Some couldn't understand why their oldest son had vanished for 5 years without a word. Others eventually learned the truth about that Thanksgiving dinner. For the first time, my family couldn't rewrite the story in their favor. But the greatest consequence wasn't theirs. It was mine. I no longer measured my worth by whether someone invited me to dinner, praised my achievements, or remembered my birthday. My peace stopped depending on people who had never truly valued me. That freedom was something no apology could ever give back, because I had earned it myself. I realized that revenge doesn't always look like exposing someone's secrets or watching their life fall apart. Sometimes the strongest response is quietly building a future so fulfilling that the people who underestimated you are forced to confront what they threw away. If there's one thing I hope anyone hearing my story remembers, it's this. The people who make you feel small often expect you to stay exactly where they left you. You don't have to. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away without a fight. Build a life they never imagined. And let your absence tell the story they refused to hear. 5 years ago, I believed family was something you held on to at any cost. I thought enduring disrespect was simply the price of belonging. Now I understand that real love never asks you to shrink yourself just to make other people comfortable. I still think about that Thanksgiving sometimes. Not because it hurts, but because it reminds me how far I've come. The paper plate that once symbolized rejection became the moment my life quietly changed direction. If that door had never closed, I might never have found the courage to open another one. I didn't become wealthy overnight. I didn't become successful to prove my family wrong. I built my life one decision at a time, surrounded by people who valued honesty, loyalty, and respect. Along the way, I found friendships that felt more like family than anything I had left behind. As for my parents, I truly hope they find peace. Carrying regret is its own punishment, and I no longer wish to add to it. Forgiveness, I learned, doesn't always mean rebuilding a relationship. Sometimes it simply means refusing to carry yesterday's pain into tomorrow. My brother and I exchange a short message every few months. Our conversations are respectful but careful. Trust isn't rebuilt with words. It's rebuilt with time. And some bridges can only support so much weight after they've been broken. Every Thanksgiving, I host dinner at my own home. Friends, neighbors, and anyone with nowhere else to go are welcome at my table. There are no reserved seats, no favorites, and no one is ever made to feel like they don't belong. Watching people laugh together reminds me that a home isn't defined by blood. It's defined by the way people treat one another. Sometimes the strongest revenge isn't making someone feel your pain. It's creating a life so full of peace that their cruelty can never reach it again. The day they left me outside, they thought they were taking away my place in the family. They never realized they were giving me the chance to build a better one.